Maya Rodriguez had always been different. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in East Los Angeles, she learned early that respect wasn't given freely. It had to be earned, sometimes with bruised knuckles and a bloodied nose. Her father, a former Marine who worked double shifts at the docks, taught her that strength wasn't about size or gender. It was about heart, determination, and the willingness to stand up when everyone else sat down. At 24, Maya stood 5 feet 6 inches tall with a lean, muscular build that spoke of countless hours in the gym. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her brown eyes held a fire that made people take notice. She had spent the last 6 years in the Army, earning her place in the Rangers through sheer grit and refusing to accept anything less than excellence from herself. The invitation to try out for the Navy SEALs came as a surprise. The program was opening its doors to female candidates for the first time, and Maya's record had caught someone's attention. Her commanding officers spoke of her tactical brilliance, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and her uncanny skill in hand-to-hand combat. But they also whispered about her temper and her refusal to back down from a challenge. The SEAL training facility in Coronado, California, looked like something out of a movie. Palm trees swayed in the ocean breeze, but Maya knew that beauty was deceiving. This place was designed to break people, to separate the warriors from the wannabes. As she walked through the gates with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, she could feel the stares of the other candidates. There were 37 men and 3 women starting the program. Maya quickly identified the alpha personalities, the guys who walked with their chests puffed out, talking loudly about their previous accomplishments. Then there was Jake "Thunder" Morrison, the unofficial leader of the group. At 6 feet 4 inches and 230 pounds of solid muscle, he commanded attention wherever he went. Morrison was a legend even before arriving at SEAL training. He had played college football at Alabama before joining the Navy, where he quickly distinguished himself in conventional forces. His nickname came from his powerful right hook, which had reportedly knocked out 3 different opponents in military boxing competitions. He had thick blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and the kind of confidence that came from never really being challenged. During the first week of orientation, Morrison established himself as the guy others looked to for guidance. He had a natural charisma that drew people in, and he wasn't shy about sharing his opinions on who belonged in the program and who didn't. The instructors seemed to appreciate his leadership qualities, often calling on him to demonstrate techniques or lead group exercises. Maya kept to herself initially, observing the dynamics and focusing on her own performance. She excelled in the physical challenges, keeping pace with even the strongest male candidates. Her shooting scores were consistently in the top 3, and her ability to navigate obstacle courses with fluid precision caught the attention of the instructors, but it was during a hand-to-hand combat demonstration that Maya first crossed paths with Morrison in a meaningful way. The instructor, a grizzled Master Chief named Patterson, was explaining the importance of leverage and technique over brute strength. He called for volunteers to demonstrate a basic takedown. Morrison's hand shot up immediately. "I'll show them how it's done, Master Chief." Patterson nodded and looked around the group. "I need someone to be Morrison's partner. Any volunteers?" The other candidates suddenly found their boots very interesting. Nobody wanted to be the guy who got embarrassed by the golden boy on day 5 of training. Maya felt the familiar fire building in her chest. She had seen this movie before. The big, confident guy who assumed he was untouchable until someone proved him wrong. "I'll do it," Maya said, stepping forward. A ripple of surprise went through the group. Morrison turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something flicker across his face. It wasn't quite dismissal, but it was close. He sized her up, taking in her smaller frame and probably calculating how quickly he could put her on the ground. "You sure about that, Rodriguez?" Morrison asked with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't want to hurt you on the first week." Maya stepped into the circle marked on the mat. "I appreciate your concern, Morrison, but I think I can handle myself." Some of the guys chuckled, and Maya could hear a few whispered comments about the brave little girl who was about to learn her place. Master Chief Patterson held up his hand for silence. "This is about technique, not strength," he reminded everyone. "Morrison, you're going to attempt a basic takedown. Rodriguez, your job is to defend and counter if possible. Remember, this is training, not a death match." Morrison approached with the casual confidence of someone who had never lost a physical confrontation. He was probably thinking about where he wanted to go for dinner, Maya thought. His first move was predictable, a straightforward attempt to grab her shoulders and use his weight advantage to bring her down. Maya had been fighting bigger opponents her entire life. She sidestepped his initial grab, used his forward momentum against him, and swept his legs while he was off balance. Morrison hit the mat hard, his face showing genuine surprise for the first time since she had met him. The circle of candidates went silent. Morrison bounced back to his feet quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment and something else Maya recognized as anger. "Lucky move," he said, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Master Chief Patterson stepped between them. "Good demonstration of defensive technique, Rodriguez. Morrison, you telegraphed that takedown from a mile away. Let's move on to the next exercise." But Maya could see in Morrison's eyes that this wasn't over. She had done something that apparently didn't happen very often. She had made him look foolish in front of his peers. As the group dispersed for the next training evolution, Morrison caught her arm. "Enjoy your moment," he said quietly, his grip just a little too tight to be friendly. "But don't think one lucky move makes you ready for this program. Some of us have been preparing for this our whole lives." Maya looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "Take your hand off me, Morrison, unless you want another demonstration of technique." He held her gaze for a long moment before releasing her arm. The message was clear. This was personal now. Maya had challenged the alpha, and in Morrison's world, that couldn't go unanswered. As she walked away, Maya felt the familiar sensation she had experienced before every major fight in her life. It was a mixture of anticipation and determination, the feeling that came when someone underestimated her one too many times. Morrison thought he knew what he was dealing with, but he was about to discover that Maya Rodriguez had never backed down from anything in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. The tension between Maya and Morrison simmered beneath the surface for the next 2 weeks. During training exercises, Morrison would make subtle comments about people who got lucky once, but couldn't repeat their success. Maya ignored most of it, focusing on her performance and letting her results speak for themselves. She consistently ranked in the top 5 in every category, from swimming times to marksmanship scores. But Morrison wasn't content to let sleeping dogs lie. He had built his reputation on being the best, the strongest, the leader that others looked up to. Having a woman, especially one significantly smaller than him, embarrass him in front of the group was eating at him. Maya could see it in the way he watched her during training, looking for any sign of weakness he could exploit. The other candidates were starting to notice the tension. Some seemed to enjoy the drama, placing quiet bets on when the two would clash again. Others tried to stay out of it entirely, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire between two of the program's top performers. The 3 women in the program, Maya, Sarah Chen, and Jessica Tank Williams, had formed a loose alliance, supporting each other through the brutal training regimen. Sarah was a former Army intelligence officer from San Francisco, brilliant with technology and strategy but struggling with some of the physical demands. Tank was a former college wrestler from Texas who could hold her own in any physical confrontation, but sometimes let her emotions get the better of her. Maya found herself naturally falling into a protective role with both women, which only seemed to irritate Morrison more. "You think you're some kind of mother hen," Morrison said to her one evening, as they cleaned their weapons after a long day of training. "But this isn't a team sport, Rodriguez. When it comes down to it, only the strongest survive." Maya looked up from the rifle she was cleaning. "Funny, I thought SEALs were supposed to be about teamwork. Maybe I misunderstood the whole team concept." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Teams are built on trust. And trust comes from knowing that the person next to you can handle their business when things get real. Some people here are just taking up space that should go to someone who actually belongs." The comment was clearly directed at the women in the program, and Maya felt her temper flare. But before she could respond, Master Chief Patterson appeared in the doorway. "Rodriguez, Morrison, I need to see you both in my office now." They followed Patterson to his small office overlooking the training compound. The walls were covered with photos of previous SEAL classes, medals and commendations from a career spanning over 20 years. Patterson closed the door and turned to face them. "I'm going to cut straight to the point," he said, his weathered face serious. "You two have a problem, and it's starting to affect the rest of the class. Morrison, you've been making comments that border on insubordination. Rodriguez, you've been walking around here with a chip on your shoulder the size of California. Maya started to protest, but Patterson held up his hand. I don't want to hear excuses from either of you. This program is hard enough without personality conflicts derailing the training. You're both exceptional candidates, but if you can't figure out how to work together, I'll recommend that both of you be dropped from the program. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Master Chief, with all due respect, I don't care what you think, Morrison. I care about results. And right now your little feud is becoming a distraction. So here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you two are going to participate in a special training exercise. It's going to test every skill you've learned so far, and you're going to do it as partners. Maya and Morrison exchanged glances, neither looking happy about the prospect. The exercise is called Trust Fall, Patterson continued. You'll be dropped 5 miles from base with minimal equipment. One of you will be injured and unable to walk. The other will have to get your partner back to base within 4 hours. If you fail, you're both out. Who decides who gets to be injured? Morrison asked. Patterson smiled grimly. I do, and I've already decided. Rodriguez, you're going to be the one who has to carry Morrison back to base. Maya felt her stomach drop. Morrison outweighed her by at least 70 pounds, and 5 miles through the California desert while carrying that much weight would be a monumental challenge. She could see the satisfaction in Morrison's eyes. Finally, a test where her size would be a definitive disadvantage. Any questions? Patterson asked. No, Master Chief, they both replied. Good, get some rest. You're going to need it. That night, Maya lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. The other women in her barracks were already asleep, exhausted from another brutal day of training. Maya's mind raced through possible strategies. She was strong, but carrying a man Morrison's size 5 miles in 4 hours would push her beyond anything she had ever attempted. Meanwhile, in the men's barracks, Morrison was having his own thoughts about the exercise. Part of him was pleased that Rodriguez would finally face a challenge that would expose her limitations. But another part, a part he didn't like to acknowledge, was actually impressed by her determination. She hadn't complained or made excuses when Patterson announced the exercise. She had simply accepted the challenge with the same quiet confidence she brought to everything else. The next morning came too soon. Maya and Morrison were driven to a remote part of the desert training area and dropped off with basic survival gear and a radio for emergencies. Patterson handed Maya a makeshift stretcher, essentially a tarp with carrying handles. Morrison, you've got a compound fracture of the left leg, Patterson announced. You can't put any weight on it, and any attempt to walk will result in further injury. Rodriguez, your mission is to get him back to base alive and in good condition. Your time starts now. As the vehicle drove away, leaving them alone in the desert with the sun already climbing toward its peak intensity, Maya looked at Morrison. He was sitting on the ground, playing his role as the injured party, but she could see the skepticism in his eyes. He didn't think she could do it. All right, Morrison, Maya said, unfolding the stretcher. Time to see how good I really am. You don't have to prove anything to me, Rodriguez, Morrison said as he positioned himself on the stretcher. This is just training. Maya secured the straps around him and tested the weight. It was immediately clear that this would be the most difficult physical challenge of her life. But as she lifted the stretcher and took her first steps toward base, she felt the familiar fire building in her chest. No, Morrison, she said, already breathing hard from the effort. This is exactly about proving something. Not to you, but to myself. As they began the long journey across the desert, neither of them could have predicted how this exercise would change everything between them. Maya was about to discover reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed, and Morrison was about to learn something about the true meaning of determination. The real test wasn't going to be whether Maya could carry him 5 miles. It was whether both of them could overcome their own prejudices and assumptions about what it meant to be strong. The first mile was manageable. Maya found a rhythm, adjusting her grip on the stretcher handles and focusing on maintaining steady progress. Morrison remained silent, occasionally shifting his weight to make the load easier to manage. The morning air was still cool, but Maya could already feel sweat beading on her forehead. By the second mile, the sun had climbed higher, and the temperature was rising steadily. Maya's breathing became more labored, and she had to stop twice to adjust her grip and rest for 30 seconds. Morrison watched her carefully, and she could see him calculating whether she would make it. You can call for backup, Morrison said during one of her brief rest stops. No shame in knowing your limits. Maya wiped sweat from her face and looked at him. Is that what you would do? That's different. I'm stronger than you. Maybe. But I'm not you, and I'm not giving up. She lifted the stretcher again and continued walking. The terrain was getting more difficult, with rocky outcroppings and sandy patches that made each step a struggle. Maya's shoulders were burning and her lower back was beginning to ache from the constant strain. By the third mile, Maya was in serious trouble. Her pace had slowed considerably and she was stopping every few hundred yards to rest. Her water was running low and the heat was becoming oppressive. Morrison could see her struggling and felt a strange mixture of admiration and concern. "Rodriguez, you're pushing too hard," he said during one of her stops. "You're going to hurt yourself." Maya's legs were shaking from the effort and her vision was starting to blur slightly from dehydration and exhaustion. But something deep inside her refused to quit. She thought about every person who had ever told her she wasn't strong enough, every coach who had suggested she try a different sport, every commander who had questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. "I'm not stopping," she said through gritted teeth. The fourth mile nearly broke her. Maya stumbled several times, and during one particularly difficult stretch of loose sand, she fell to her knees with Morrison still strapped to the stretcher. For a moment, she stayed there on all fours, breathing heavily and fighting the urge to vomit from exhaustion. Morrison watched her struggle and felt something shift inside him. This woman was killing herself to prove a point, pushing her body far beyond what should have been possible. He had been wrong about her. This wasn't about ego or stubbornness. This was about something much deeper. "Maya," he said, using her first name for the first time, "you've already proven your point. You don't have to destroy yourself." Maya looked up at him, her face flushed and covered in sweat and dirt. "What point is that, Morrison?" "That you're tougher than any of us gave you credit for. Including me." Maya forced herself back to her feet and picked up the stretcher handles again. "I'm not doing this to prove anything to you or anyone else. I'm doing this because it's my job." The final mile was a blur of pain and determination. Maya's body was operating on pure willpower, her muscles screaming in protest with every step. She could see the base in the distance, a shimmering mirage that seemed to get no closer no matter how far she walked. With half a mile to go, Maya's legs finally gave out. She collapsed in the sand, the stretcher falling with her. Morrison quickly freed himself from the straps and knelt beside her, checking for signs of heat exhaustion or dehydration. "I'm fine," Maya gasped, trying to get back to her feet. "Just need a minute." But Morrison could see that she wasn't fine. Her lips were cracked from dehydration, her skin was flushed and hot to the touch, and her hands were shaking uncontrollably. If she continued, she could seriously injure herself or worse. "That's enough," Morrison said firmly. "I'm calling for backup." "No," Maya protested weakly. "I can make it." Morrison looked at her with a new respect he had never felt before. This woman had just carried him over 4.5 miles through desert terrain while dealing with heat, exhaustion, and her own body's limitations. She had pushed herself to the absolute breaking point and was still trying to continue. "Maya, listen to me," he said, taking her hand. "You've already won. You've proven everything you needed to prove and more, but I'm not going to watch you hurt yourself trying to cover the last half mile." Before Maya could protest further, Morrison reached for the emergency radio, but as he was about to make the call, they heard the sound of approaching vehicles. Master Chief Patterson and the medical team appeared over a nearby ridge, having monitored their progress from a distance. Patterson jumped out of the lead vehicle and quickly assessed the situation. He could see Maya's condition and Morrison's concern, and he understood immediately what had happened. "Outstanding performance." "Rodriguez," Patterson said as the medics began checking Maya's vital signs. 4.5 miles in this heat while carrying a man Morrison's size is beyond impressive. "It's extraordinary." Maya tried to sit up straighter. "I didn't complete the mission, Master Chief. I failed." Patterson looked at her with something approaching amazement. "Rodriguez, the record for this exercise is 3.25 miles. You just broke that record by over a mile while carrying one of the heaviest candidates in the program. The only thing you failed to do was recognize when you had already exceeded every reasonable expectation." As the medics helped Maya into the back of the medical vehicle, Morrison climbed in beside her. For the first time since they had met, the tension between them was gone, replaced by something that resembled mutual respect. "Why did you do it?" Morrison asked as they drove back to base. "Why push yourself that hard?" Maya leaned back against the seat, finally allowing herself to feel the full extent of her exhaustion. Because if I didn't, I'd always wonder if I could have. And wondering is worse than failing. Morrison nodded slowly, understanding something about Maya that he had missed before. She wasn't trying to prove she was better than him or anyone else. She was trying to prove to herself that she belonged, that she could handle whatever challenges came her way. For what it's worth, Morrison said quietly, I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. Maya looked at him with tired eyes. What changed your mind? Watching you refuse to quit even when your body was shutting down. That's not about gender or size or any of the things I thought mattered. That's about character. As they arrived at the medical facility, Maya realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. The hostility was gone, but she wasn't naive enough to think their problems were completely solved. Morrison might respect her now, but respect and acceptance were two different things. And there were still 26 other candidates who might not be as willing to change their minds about what women could accomplish in the SEALs program. The real test, Maya knew, was still coming. Maya spent 2 days in the medical bay recovering from severe dehydration and muscle strain. The base doctor, a no-nonsense Navy physician named Commander Walsh, kept her under observation to ensure there were no long-term effects from her desert ordeal. Word of her performance had spread quickly through the training facility, creating a buzz among both instructors and candidates. When Maya returned to training, she found that the atmosphere in her barracks had changed. Some of the candidates who had previously ignored her now nodded respectfully when she passed. Others seemed even more hostile, as if her success somehow diminished their own achievements. But the most surprising change was in Morrison's behavior. During morning physical training, Morrison positioned himself near Maya during exercises, offering quiet encouragement and technical advice. When they moved to weapons training, he shared ammunition when her supply ran low. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. The man who had been her biggest critic was now acting like an ally. What's your game, Morrison? Maya asked him after a particularly grueling day of combat diving exercises. They were sitting by the equipment shed, cleaning their gear as the sun set over the Pacific. Morrison looked up from the diving mask he was working on. No game, I told you before, I was wrong about you. I'm trying to make up for it. People don't change that fast, Maya said, suspicious of his motives. Especially people like you. People like me? Morrison's voice carried a hint of defensiveness. Alpha types. Leaders. Guys who are used to being the biggest and strongest in every room they enter. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. You want to know the truth? Watching you carry me through that desert scared the hell out of me. Maya stopped cleaning her equipment and looked at him. Scared you how? It made me realize that everything I thought I knew about strength and toughness was incomplete. I've been coasting on my physical advantages my whole life, assuming that being big and strong was enough. But what you did out there, that was something else entirely. That was strength I don't have. Before Maya could respond, they were interrupted by the approach of 3 other candidates. Danny "Brick" Kowalski, a former Marine from Chicago, Alex Torres, a Navy explosive ordnance disposal expert from Florida, and Mike Razor Sullivan, a former Army Ranger from Boston. All 3 had been part of Morrison's inner circle since the beginning of training. Hey, Thunder, Brick said, using Morrison's nickname. We're heading to the mess hall. You coming? Morrison glanced at Maya, then back at his friends. Actually, I was thinking of grabbing chow with Rodriguez. We're working on some tactics for tomorrow's exercise. The 3 men exchanged glances. It was clear that Morrison's new alliance with Maya didn't sit well with them. Since when do you need to study tactics with anyone? Torres asked, his tone slightly mocking. Especially someone who barely made it through the desert exercise without collapsing. Maya felt her temper flare, but Morrison spoke before she could respond. Careful, Torres. Rodriguez just broke a training record that stood for 5 years. Maybe instead of running your mouth, you should be asking what you can learn from her. The tension was immediate and palpable. Torres stepped closer, his jaw set in anger. What I learned is that some people get special treatment around here. If any of us had collapsed in the desert, we'd have been dropped from the program. She didn't collapse until after she'd carried me farther than anyone in the history of this training, Morrison said, standing up to face Torres. And she tried to keep going even then. Sullivan stepped between them before the confrontation could escalate. Easy, guys. We're all on the same team here. But Maya could see that they weren't all on the same team. Morrison's shift in attitude had created a divide among the candidates that went beyond simple personality conflicts. Some of the men saw Maya's success as proof that the program was becoming too soft, that standards were being lowered to accommodate women. Others were beginning to respect her abilities but weren't sure how to reconcile that with their preconceived notions about gender and combat roles. The situation became more complicated over the following weeks as the training intensified. The class was down to 28 candidates, 3 women and 25 men. The exercises became more complex, requiring higher levels of teamwork and trust. Maya found herself naturally emerging as a leader in many scenarios, her tactical intelligence and calm decision-making, under pressure earning recognition from the instructors. But her growing prominence also created more friction. During a simulated hostage rescue exercise, Maya's team successfully completed the mission while Torres's team failed spectacularly due to poor planning and communication. After the debriefing, Torres cornered Maya near the barracks. "You think you're pretty smart, don't you?" Torres said, his voice low and threatening. "But this isn't some college debate club. This is about life and death, and when the shooting starts, nobody's going to care about your test scores." Maya faced him calmly. "You're right, Torres. When the shooting starts, they're going to care about whether I can do my job, just like they'll care about whether you can do yours. The difference is, I'm confident in my abilities. You seem more worried about mine than your own." Their confrontation was witnessed by several other candidates, including Morrison, who stepped between them. "Back off, Torres," Morrison said firmly. "Rodriguez doesn't need to prove anything to you or anyone else. She's earned her place here just like the rest of us." Torres looked around at the assembled candidates, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is unreal. Thunder Morrison defending some woman who probably can't even do 10 pull-ups. 53, Maya said quietly. "What?" Torres turned to look at her. 53 pull-ups. That was my last PT test score. What was yours? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Torres's best pull-up score was 41, and everyone there knew it. His face grew even redder as he realized he had been publicly embarrassed by the woman he was trying to intimidate. "This isn't over," Torres muttered as he stalked away. Morrison watched him go, then turned to Maya. "You've got enemies now. Real ones," Maya shrugged. "I've had enemies before. They usually get over it or get out of my way." But even as she projected confidence, Maya knew that the situation was becoming dangerous. Torres wasn't just another sexist who would eventually come around. He was genuinely threatened by her presence and success. And he wasn't alone. She could see the same resentment building in several other candidates who felt that the program was being compromised by political correctness. That night, as Maya lay in her bunk, she realized that the physical challenges of SEAL training were only part of the battle. The real fight was for acceptance and legitimacy in a culture that had been exclusively male for decades. Some men like Morrison were capable of changing their minds when presented with evidence that challenged their assumptions. Others, like Torres, would never accept that a woman could be their equal in this environment. Maya closed her eyes and tried to focus on tomorrow's training. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst confrontations were still ahead. The desert exercise had proven her physical capabilities, but it had also made her a target for those who wanted to see her fail. And Torres had just made it clear that he wasn't going to wait for her to fail on her own. He was going to try to help that failure along. The opportunity Torres had been waiting for came during the 6th week of training. The class was scheduled for an advanced hand-to-hand combat assessment, where candidates would demonstrate their proficiency in close-quarters fighting techniques. Unlike the earlier training demonstrations, these sessions were conducted in front of the entire class and a panel of senior instructors, including Master Chief Patterson and several visiting officers from SEAL Team 3. Maya had been looking forward to the assessment. Hand-to-hand combat had always been one of her strongest skills, and she was confident in her ability to perform well. What she didn't know was that Torres had been working behind the scenes to set up a situation that would expose what he saw as her fundamental weakness. 2 days before the assessment, Torres approached Morrison during evening chow. Despite their recent tensions, Morrison still commanded respect among many of the candidates, and Torres knew that getting Morrison on his side would be crucial for his plan. "Thunder, I need to talk to you about something," Torres said, sitting down across from Morrison in the mess hall. "It's about Rodriguez." Morrison looked up from his meal, immediately wary. What about her? Look, I know you two have become friends and I respect that, but I'm worried about what's going to happen when she faces a real opponent in combat assessment. Maya can handle herself, Morrison said firmly. She's proven that already. Torres leaned forward, lowering his voice. In training exercises, sure. But this assessment is different. They're going to pair us up randomly, and she could end up facing someone like Brick or Sullivan, guys who aren't going to hold back just because she's a woman. Morrison frowned. He had been thinking the same thing, though he hadn't wanted to admit it. Maya was skilled, but she was also significantly smaller than most of the male candidates. In a real fight, size and strength would matter. What are you suggesting? Morrison asked. I'm suggesting that maybe she should face someone who won't try to hurt her unnecessarily. Someone who can give her a good match without turning it into a demolition derby. Morrison studied Torres's face, looking for the angle. Someone like you? Or someone like you? Torres replied smoothly. You're both top performers, you've been training together, and you know her capabilities. It would be a fair fight that showcases both of your skills without anyone getting seriously injured. What Torres didn't tell Morrison was that he had already spoken to several other candidates, planting seeds of doubt about Maya's readiness for the assessment. He had suggested to Brick that Maya might get hurt if she faced a real opponent. He had mentioned to Sullivan that it would be embarrassing for everyone if Maya got dominated in front of the visiting officers. Slowly but surely, he was building consensus that something needed to be done to protect both Maya and the program's reputation. The morning of the assessment, Maya arrived at the training facility feeling confident and focused. She had spent extra time working on her technique, and she was ready to demonstrate that her performance in previous exercises hadn't been a fluke. Master Chief Patterson addressed the assembled candidates. Today's assessment will determine your readiness for advanced combat training. You'll be randomly paired for 3-minute matches, evaluated on technique, aggression, and tactical thinking. The matches will be full contact but controlled. The safety of your fellow candidates is paramount. Patterson began drawing names from a hat, announcing the pairings. Maya listened as other candidates were matched up, waiting for her name to be called. When Patterson finally pulled her name, Maya felt her stomach tighten with anticipation. Rodriguez, Patterson announced, reaching into the hat for the second name. You'll be facing Morrison. Maya looked across the group at Morrison, who met her gaze with an unreadable expression. She had expected to face one of the other candidates, and part of her was relieved that it would be Morrison rather than someone like Torres or Brick. But another part of her was disappointed. She had hoped to prove herself against someone who wasn't already convinced of her abilities. What Maya didn't know was that Morrison's name hadn't been randomly drawn. Torres had spent the previous evening convincing several candidates to volunteer to switch pairings if their names came up with Maya's. He had argued that it would be better for everyone if Maya faced someone who wouldn't try to destroy her in front of the brass. Morrison himself was conflicted about the pairing. On one hand, he genuinely respected Maya's abilities and didn't want to hurt her. On the other hand, he understood that this assessment was crucial for both of their futures in the program. If he went easy on her, it would undermine her credibility. If he fought at full intensity, he might seriously injure her. As the first matches began, Maya watched her fellow candidates compete. The fights were intense and technical, with most matches going the full 3 minutes. She could see the visiting officers taking detailed notes, clearly evaluating not just fighting ability but mental toughness and composure under pressure. When their turn came, Maya and Morrison stepped into the circle marked on the mat. The other candidates formed a ring around them, and Maya could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. This wasn't just about demonstrating technique, this was about proving that women belonged in the program. Fighters ready? Patterson called out. Maya and Morrison touched gloves and began circling each other. Morrison was trying to find the right balance between competitive intensity and concern for Maya's safety. Maya, sensing his hesitation, knew she needed to establish the tone of the fight immediately. She moved in quickly, attempting a leg sweep that Morrison easily avoided, but her aggression seemed to wake something up in him, and he responded with a takedown attempt that Maya barely escaped. For the first minute, they were evenly matched, with neither fighter gaining a significant advantage. But Maya could sense that Morrison was holding back, pulling his punches slightly and not following through on takedown attempts the way he would against another male opponent. The realization frustrated her. She wanted to win or lose based on her actual abilities, not because her opponent was treating her like she might break. During a brief clinch, Maya whispered urgently in Morrison's ear, "Stop going easy on me. Fight me like you mean it, or this whole thing is meaningless." Morrison looked into her eyes and saw the fierce determination he had witnessed in the desert. Maya wasn't asking for protection. She was demanding the respect of a real fight. From that moment, the dynamic changed completely. Morrison began fighting with full intensity, using his size and strength advantages while Maya countered with superior speed and technique. The crowd of candidates grew quieter, realizing they were witnessing something special. But what none of them knew was that Torres had one final card to play. As the fight entered its final minute, he caught the eye of Brick Kowalski and nodded slightly. Brick understood the signal and began shouting encouragement to Morrison that was clearly designed to provoke Maya. "Come on, Thunder," Brick yelled. "Show her what real SEAL training looks like. Don't let some woman embarrass you in front of everyone." Maya heard the comments and felt her focus waver for just a moment. That moment was all Morrison needed to attempt a powerful takedown that sent Maya hard to the mat. As she hit the ground, she could hear Torres and his allies cheering, clearly thinking the fight was over. But Maya wasn't finished. As Morrison moved in to establish a dominant position, Maya saw her opportunity. Using a technique she had perfected over years of fighting larger opponents, she trapped Morrison's arm and used his own momentum to flip their positions. What happened next would be talked about for years in the SEAL training community. Maya's counterattack was so perfectly executed, so explosive and unexpected, that Morrison found himself completely off balance. Maya's follow-up strike, a controlled but powerful hit to Morrison's ribs, was delivered with textbook precision and devastating effectiveness. The sound of the impact echoed across the training area, and Morrison dropped to one knee, clearly winded and in pain. For a moment, the entire group was silent, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Maya had not only held her own against the program's star candidate, she had dominated the final exchange and left him struggling to breathe. The woman they had been protecting and underestimating had just proven that she was every bit as dangerous as any man in the program. The silence that followed Maya's strike seemed to stretch on forever. Morrison remained on one knee, one hand pressed against his ribs, his face contorted in pain as he struggled to catch his breath. Maya stood over him, her chest heaving from exertion, her eyes scanning the circle of stunned faces surrounding them. Master Chief Patterson was the first to react, stepping into the circle to check on Morrison. "Time," he called, officially ending the match. "Medical, get over here and check Morrison's ribs." As the base medic rushed forward, Maya extended her hand to help Morrison to his feet. He looked up at her with a mixture of pain and genuine amazement, accepting her assistance as he slowly stood up. "Jesus, Maya," Morrison whispered, still breathing carefully. "Where did that come from?" Before Maya could answer, the reaction from the crowd began to ripple outward. Some candidates stood in respectful silence, clearly impressed by what they had witnessed. Others looked shocked, as if they couldn't quite process what had just happened. But it was Torres's reaction that caught Maya's attention. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage. "Lucky shot," Torres called out, his voice carrying across the training area. Anyone can get in one good hit when their opponent isn't expecting it. Maya turned to face him, her adrenaline still pumping from the fight. "You think that was luck, Torres? I think Morrison was going easy on you and you took advantage of it," Torres replied, stepping closer to the circle. "In a real fight against a real opponent, you wouldn't last 30 seconds. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Maya could see what he was doing, trying to diminish her victory by suggesting that Morrison hadn't been fighting seriously. But she also sensed an opportunity to settle things between them once and for all. "Are you volunteering to prove your theory?" Maya asked. Master Chief Patterson looked up from where he was conferring with the medic about Morrison's condition. "Stand down, both of you. The assessment is over." But Torres was already shaking his head. "With respect, Master Chief, I think we need to see a real demonstration here. If Rodriguez is going to be part of this program, we need to know she can handle herself against someone who isn't pulling punches." Patterson's eyes narrowed. He could sense the undercurrents of tension and knew that this moment could define the rest of the training cycle. If he shut down the confrontation, Torres and his supporters would always claim that Maya had been protected. If he allowed it to continue, someone could get seriously hurt. "Torres, you're out of line," Patterson said firmly. The assessment protocol doesn't include grudge matches, but Maya stepped forward. Master Chief, I'd like to accept Torres's challenge. The training area fell completely silent. Even the visiting officers from SEAL Team 3 were paying close attention now, understanding that they were witnessing something significant. Patterson studied Maya's face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. What he saw was the same calm determination she had shown throughout the program. Rodriguez, you don't have anything to prove to anyone here. Maybe not, Maya replied. But Torres seems to think I do. And frankly, I'm tired of having this conversation. Morrison, who was still being examined by the medic, called out from the sidelines. Maya, don't do this. You already proved your point. But Maya could see in Torres's eyes that Morrison was wrong. Torres would never accept her presence in the program unless she defeated him decisively, and she was tired of walking on eggshells, tired of wondering when the next challenge would come. 3 minutes, same rules as before, Maya said, looking directly at Torres. Unless you'd rather keep talking about what you think would happen. Torres glanced around at the assembled candidates and officers. He had painted himself into a corner. Backing down now would make him look like a coward. But fighting Maya carried its own risks. If he hurt her badly, he could be dropped from the program for unnecessary aggression. If she beat him, his credibility would be destroyed. Fine, Torres said, stepping into the circle. But don't expect me to go easy on you like Morrison did. As they faced off, Maya could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This wasn't just about proving herself to Torres or even to the program. This was about every woman who had ever been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough to compete with men. This was about changing minds and opening doors that had been closed for decades. Torres was bigger than Morrison, 6 feet 2 inches, and 240 pounds of solid muscle. He was also angrier, more motivated to prove his point through violence. As they began to circle each other, Maya could see the intensity in his eyes. This wouldn't be a technical sparring match. Torres intended to hurt her. His first attack came quickly, a powerful right cross that Maya barely avoided. Torres followed immediately with a takedown attempt, using his weight advantage to try to drive her to the ground. Maya sprawled defensively, but Torres was relentless, continuing to press forward with a combination of strikes and grappling attempts. For the first minute, Maya was purely defensive, using her speed and footwork to avoid Torres's most dangerous attacks. But she could tell that he was trying to wear her down, using his size and strength to force her into a battle of attrition that she couldn't win. The crowd was completely silent now, mesmerized by the intensity of the fight. Even Patterson found himself holding his breath as Maya barely escaped a submission attempt that could have ended the match. But Maya had been studying Torres for weeks, and she knew his weakness. He was aggressive and powerful, but he was also impatient. He wanted to end the fight quickly and decisively, which meant he would eventually overcommit to an attack. That moment came in the second minute, when Torres attempted a devastating right hook that would have knocked out most opponents. But Maya had been waiting for exactly this opening. She ducked under the punch, stepped inside Torres's guard, and drove her knee upward into his solar plexus with every ounce of strength she possessed. The impact lifted Torres off his feet and sent him crashing backward onto the mat. He hit the ground hard and didn't get up, his face turning an alarming shade of red as he gasped for air. This time, the silence was even more profound. Maya stood in the center of the circle, barely breathing hard, looking down at Torres as he struggled to recover. She had just defeated the program's most vocal critic in front of everyone, using technique and timing to overcome a significant size disadvantage. But it was what happened next that would be remembered long after the training cycle ended. Instead of celebrating or gloating, Maya knelt beside Torres and helped him sit up, making sure he could breathe properly. "You all right?" she asked quietly. Torres looked up at her with a mixture of pain, embarrassment, and something that might have been respect. He nodded slowly, still trying to catch his breath. Maya stood up and looked around at the assembled candidates and instructors. "Anyone else have questions about whether I belong here?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Torres had been the most vocal opponent of women in the program, and Maya had just defeated him convincingly and professionally. More importantly, she had shown grace in victory, helping her fallen opponent instead of humiliating him further. Master Chief Patterson stepped forward, his weathered face showing something that might have been pride. "Outstanding demonstration, Rodriguez. That's exactly the kind of controlled aggression and technical proficiency we're looking for in SEAL candidates. As the group began to disperse, Maya realized that something fundamental had shifted. The whispered conversations and doubtful glances were gone, replaced by nods of genuine respect. She had finally proven that she belonged not through politics or quotas, but through demonstrated competence under pressure. Morrison approached her as she was leaving the training area, his ribs taped but his spirit intact. "How do you feel?" he asked. Maya considered the question carefully. "Like I can finally stop fighting for respect and start fighting for the mission." She was right. The personal battles were over. Now the real training could begin. 6 months after the fight that changed everything, Maya Rodriguez stood on the beach at Coronado wearing the coveted SEAL Trident pin on her uniform. Only 14 candidates from her original class of 40 had made it through the complete training program. Maya was not only among them, she had graduated second in her class behind only Morrison, who had become her closest ally and training partner. The graduation ceremony was attended by high-ranking Navy officials, family members, and media representatives documenting the historic inclusion of women in the SEAL program. Maya's parents had flown in from Los Angeles, her father wearing his old Marine dress blues and her mother barely containing her pride and worry. But for Maya, the most meaningful moment came when Master Chief Patterson pulled her aside after the ceremony. "Rodriguez, I've been training SEAL candidates for over 20 years, he said, his gruff voice unusually emotional. "I've seen a lot of tough people come through this program. But what you did, the way you handled yourself, the way you earned respect instead of demanding it, that was something special." Maya looked out at the Pacific Ocean, where she would soon be conducting real missions with real consequences. "Master Chief, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Did you know? When you set up that desert exercise, did you know it would lead to all this?" Patterson smiled grimly. "I knew you and Morrison needed to figure out how to work together. I didn't know you'd end up breaking training records and knocking out half the class in hand-to-hand combat." 3 years later, Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez was deployed with SEAL Team 7 in the Mediterranean, part of a counter-terrorism operation that would never appear in any newspaper. Her team leader was Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, who had become not just a colleague but one of her closest friends. During a particularly dangerous mission in Syria, Maya found herself providing overwatch for Morrison's assault team as they cleared a terrorist safehouse. When Morrison's team came under heavy fire and was pinned down, Maya made the decision to leave her protected position and join the fight. Moving through enemy fire with the same calm precision she had shown in training, Maya flanked the terrorist position and eliminated 3 fighters, allowing Morrison's team to complete their mission successfully. Later, as they extracted from the target area, Morrison grabbed her arm. "Maya, that was incredible. You saved all our lives back there." Maya looked at him with the same steady gaze she had maintained since their first confrontation years earlier. "That's what teammates do, Jake. We have each other's backs." The terrorist leader they captured that night provided intelligence that prevented a major attack on European targets. Maya's actions were classified, but they earned her a Bronze Star and the respect of the entire SEAL community. Alex Torres, who had washed out of the program 6 weeks after his fight with Maya, had eventually found his way to a successful career in private security. He often told the story of the woman who had knocked him out in SEAL training, but his version had evolved over the years. Now he described Maya as one of the toughest fighters he had ever faced, and he encouraged other security firms to recruit women with similar capabilities. Sarah Chen and Jessica Tank Williams had both graduated from the program as well, joining Maya as part of the first generation of female Navy SEALs. They regularly stayed in touch, supporting each other through the challenges of operational deployments and the ongoing scrutiny that came with being pioneers in their field. But it was during a mission briefing 5 years after graduation that Maya truly understood the impact of what she had accomplished. She was briefing a new class of SEAL candidates on urban warfare tactics when she noticed something that made her pause. In the audience of 40 new candidates, 8 were women. They sat among their male classmates without fanfare or special attention, treated as equals from day one. The questions they asked were technical and professional, focused on mission effectiveness rather than proving they belonged. After the briefing, one of the female candidates approached Maya. "Ma'am, my name is Ensign Patricia Santos. I just wanted to thank you. Thank me for what, Ensign? For making it possible for women like me to be here without having to fight for basic respect. My instructors treat me exactly the same as everyone else, and that's because of what you and the other first-generation female SEALs accomplished. Maya realized that Santos was right. The battles she had fought, both physical and psychological, had been necessary to open doors for the women who came after her. But those future generations wouldn't have to fight the same battles. They could focus entirely on becoming the best warriors possible. That evening, Maya called Morrison, who was now stationed in Virginia Beach with SEAL Team 6. "Jake, I had an interesting realization today," she said. "What's that?" "Remember when we first met and you asked me why I pushed myself so hard in the desert? You said you had to know if you could do it. I think I was wrong. I wasn't doing it to prove I could. I was doing it so that other women wouldn't have to." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "You know what the best part is, Maya." "What?" "You succeeded. The women in the program now aren't fighting to prove they belong. They're just fighting to be the best SEALs they can be." "That's exactly what it should be." Maya smiled, looking out at the ocean from her apartment balcony. Somewhere out there, the next generation of female SEALs was training, preparing for missions that would protect American interests around the world. They would face danger and hardship, but they wouldn't face the skepticism and hostility that Maya's generation had encountered. The fight in the training circle had lasted 3 minutes, but its impact would be felt for decades. Maya Rodriguez had broken more than Torres's ribs that day. She had broken through barriers that had existed for generations, opening a path for others to follow. As she prepared for her next deployment, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had started as an angry young woman determined to prove she was as tough as any man. She had evolved into a professional warrior focused on mission accomplishment and team success. The transformation hadn't been easy, and it hadn't happened overnight. But every challenge she had faced, every fight she had won or lost, had been worth it for this moment, knowing that the women who came after her would have opportunities she could only have dreamed of when she first walked through the gates at Coronado. Maya Rodriguez had laughed at those who doubted her, struck down those who challenged her, and ultimately earned the respect of everyone who had initially dismissed her. But her greatest victory wasn't in any individual fight. It was in changing an entire culture and opening doors that would remain open long after she was gone. The fight was over. The mission continued.